So I have a question for you. How many of you would love to double your income in 61 days? If I have your attention, good, because that is exactly what we are going to be talking about today on the podcast. My guest today is Scott Groves. He's one of the top mortgage loan officers in the entire country, and he's the author of a book called Lead Generate, 61 Days to Double Your Pay. And I was so excited to bring Scott on today. I met him a couple years back. We were in a mastermind together for a year, and I got to see how he works and what he's created in his life, and it's incredible. And I was really excited to hear from him on his best tips and strategies for anyone who's looking to make a massive leap in their income and in their results quickly. That's so much of what this podcast is about, is how do we make an instant impact in our results? And Scott shares how to do that in your income and in your pay. So you are going to love this conversation with Scott. You're going to get so many good things out of learning from him. And I really, really encourage that you get his book and read it. I couldn't stop reading it. I have so many pages dog-eared in the book. You're going to learn so much, and you're going to get a lot of great tips that you can start implementing today to make more money quickly. So without further ado, I am thrilled to share with you my guest, Scott Groves. Scott Groves, my friend, so good to have you on the Instant Impact podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me, Elyse. I really appreciate, our time to talk, and then obviously the collaboration that we've done in the past and the coaching groups and mastermind groups that we've been part of. So excited for the conversation today, and also to be one of your, initial 10, 20 guests here on Instant Impact. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a big honor. Don't ever forget that. I want you to always remember what a big honor this is.
Oh, I know. I hope one day when we're both really big deal, we'll look back on this podcast and remember what a big deal we weren't.
Remember when, right?
Yeah.
Well, you are already a pretty big deal. And that's one of the things I'm excited to talk with you about is you've built one of the most successful businesses in the mortgage industry out there. And so I'd love to hear just a little bit for people who aren't yet familiar with you. Tell us about your backstory, what got you to where you are, and what you do today.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'll try to keep it short. And the first thing I have to do is give credit to all of the business partners that I work with. Here in the mortgage business, I have a business partner named Justin Bale. Could not live without. He is the driving force in so many ways in my business. In the coaching business that I run for loan officers, which is a completely different third-party business, I have an executive assistant / editor / video / customer service rep named Christopher DeRosa. Could not run the company without him. And then in my life, I've got my life partner and my wife, Karina Groves, who, our kids would probably already be in a gang at 3 years old if it wasn't for her running the home ship. So, part of what you talk about is how do you meet the right people and make impact faster by building relationships. And I think I've been really good at that, building strategic partners in my life, in my marriage, in my business, in my mortgage business. I've got a very similar kind of what has now become the standard business story. Did really well. 2009 came along, did very poorly. Probably should have declared bankruptcy, but just couldn't bring myself to do it. And then really spent the last 10 years rebuilding. So myself and my business partner, Justin, will do somewhere annually between $100 and $150 million in mortgage business, which is extremely well, top 1% in America. Obviously, we want to do much, much better and be in like the top 10 in America. So we've got a ways to go there. And then about 5 years ago, even though I probably would have been the person that swore off management and leadership and, never wanting to become that middle manager who lost touch with the day-to-day grind of being a loan officer, people just started calling me because of the success that I was having and saying, hey, can I get 5 minutes here and 5 minutes here? And you know exactly how this goes. When somebody asks for 5 minutes, what they really want is an hour of free coaching. And so that kind of morphed into the shirt that I'm wearing, Consolidated Coaching. And so now I coach loan officers and realtors on, a lot of things, building their business similar to you. How do you have immediate impact, instant impact? How do you build the right relationships? And when I went to go write my first book, the average business book is between about 30,000 and 40,000 words. And when I finally hired a coach, I believe in coaches for most things in my life, when I finally hired a coach, I had 420,000 words because there was everything in there from team building to leadership to lead generation to scripts to all this kind of stuff. And my coach really said, okay, you probably got 5 or 10 volumes here of business books. Let's really drill down into one topic And what is the number one thing that sales professionals, especially commissioned sales, entrepreneurial, eat what you kill, fully commissioned people need to do? And I said, well, the number one thing that's easy is every single day they have to lead generate. And he said, okay, you probably have 40 or 50,000 words in this transcript of lead generation. Let's just zero in on that. So, shameless self-promotion, the book Lead Generate 61 Days to Double Your Pay was born from that. And it's because, it doesn't matter whether you're selling mortgages or houses or widgets or planners or services, coaching services like you are, or whether you're just trying to get people to adopt your brand and you don't even have anything to sell them yet. You have to do lead generation activities every single day, or 6 months from now, you're going to be out of business. So that's where we're at. I've got about 19 years in the business. I've got a great wife, 3 kids, and now I've got a number one best-selling book, and so that's pretty cool.
That is so awesome. I'm curious
about the only thing going poorly, by the way. The only thing going poorly is if you're listening to this, I'm drinking out of a Steelers cup. My Steelers not make the playoffs because of Le'Veon Bell. So I'm very bitter. That's not the only thing that's going poorly in the last 12 months.
Well, we can black out your video every time you pick up the Steelers cup, if that makes you feel better.
Perfect.
So I'm curious about the 61 days. Why 61?
Because it's one more than 60. I don't know. At the end of the day, depending on whose research you read, somewhere it takes between 7 days or 21 days or 47 days or 52.5 days or 60 days to build a new habit. But I haven't seen any of the psychology or the studies or anything of that nature that says, well, it takes longer than 60 days to build a new habit. So we went with 61 days because that's going to help you build a new habit. And the book is just broken into 61 2 to 3 page chapters. And it's just every day. It's an accountability, it's an accountability journal effectively, where every day you just buy the book, you read 2 or 3 pages. If you're in any vertical of sales or lead generation or an entrepreneurial spirit, you just read 2 or 3 pages and say, okay, here's something I can do to commit to just get 1% better, or get a new idea or a tactic or a strategy, or some way to manage my day, my time, my health, my email, just a little tip every day. And what we have found is the people that are in our coaching program, because I've got about 270 people, I think, in our coaching program for mortgage professionals, is the ones that actually show up to the webinars every day. They do the 10-minute check-in. They go read 2 or 3 pages from the book. Surprise, surprise, their business doubles because they're actually committing to the activities. It's like anything else in our world. You and I are a big fan. I think I see it up there on your bookshelf of Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect. It's that same idea, right? Like, you just start by leaving the mayonnaise off your sandwich, and 15 years later, you haven't gained the 10 pounds that your neighbor who put the mayonnaise on the sandwich gained from eating the mayonnaise. And this is kind of the opposite of that. So instead of taking something away, we're just building on a little habit every day, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And now I have people in our coaching program that are like, oh, our business has taken off so much. It's enabled me to hire somebody to handle a bunch of that busy work that I used to do. Now I can lead generate for 2 hours a day and 2.5 hours a day. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of success. And that's kind of what the book does.
So here's what's interesting to me about that. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, a lot of the people who listen to the show are really interested in getting fast results. So it's, how do I shorten the amount of time it takes to get me from point A to point B? So I was going to ask you, what are your top tips to do it in less time? I'm almost wondering if that's the wrong question, because some of what I'm hearing from you is that it's not necessarily a one tip that shortens the time. It's more the consistency to it. So am I off base there? Is there something that stands out more than another tip in your book to you? Is like, hey, if you just did this one thing, it would get you the fastest results? Or is it really just about that consistent compounded growth and consistently doing it every day?
Right. It's a really great question. And I would say the one thing that will really change the model and get people quicker, faster, better impact is if in their vocabulary, they can switch out the word motivation for commitment. If they can switch out the word motivation for commitment, that will be a game changer for them. I keep this little call tracker. This is something that we use in our coaching program. For those of you that can't see it or listen to the podcast, I have this physical representation on my desk. It's just a weekly call tracker. And it tells me exactly who I have to call. 3 new buyers, 3 new realtor relationships, 3 existing relationships, 1 person who has a listing in our area. And it tells me exactly what to do. And when I woke up this morning, the last thing I wanted to do in this world was cold call 10 people and say, hey, this is Scott. Did I catch you at a bad time? Just wanted to check in. We're a lender right down the street. Like, I was not motivated to do that. You know what I'm motivated to do? I'm motivated to go home and see my kids and go to Cabo and have a drink and smoke a cigar and enjoy being on the beach. And this idea of, I don't know what book normalized this idea of like, well, if you just have motivation and you just surround yourself with the right people and you just believe in the correct divine spiritual source, well, then you'll just get hit with this motivation and you'll love what you do and you'll come to work and you'll crush in your prospect. That's not really the case. Like, every time I use the word motivation, I immediately try to correct myself and change it for the word commitment, because I am committed to making the calls. I am committed to reading 2 or 3 pages in the book. I am committed to getting on these podcasts and expanding my brand. I'm not motivated to do it. Most people aren't motivated to do what they do at work. And I think there's this danger of, I'm just going to go ahead and pick on this group of people. There's a danger in this 23-year-old Instagram life coach who's out there telling everybody like, well, if you don't love what you do, if you don't love what you do, if you don't love what you do, then you can't be successful. Well, that's bullshit, because I don't love looking at tax returns anymore. I've been doing this for 18 years. Like, looking at tax returns and being like, wonder what Elyse did with her 1120Ss. Did she incorporate last year? Or did she incorporate 2 years ago? That's not fun. That's not motivating. But I'm committed to doing it because of the outcome and the ability and the lifestyle that it creates. So if there was one tip in the book, it would be just to read the book and commit to doing the activities. Don't wait for motivation, because most people get motivated when it's too little too late. They say that the average married couple starts going to counseling 2 or 3 years too late, because now they're motivated to save their marriage. 2 or 3 years ago, they weren't committed to improving their marriage. So it's the same thing. My tip would be, whatever you're going to do, it would be arrogant and ignorant of me to say to your entire audience, well, if you live in Minnesota versus Southern California versus Alaska, just do this one thing and it'll change your business. Because no coach, no guru, no book really has that ideal. Nobody has that secret sauce. If there was, we'd all do the secret sauce and we'd all be multimillionaires. But the one thing that you can do is whatever you need to be doing. And if you're listening to this, you know what you need to be doing. For me, I have to make 10 calls a day. For you, you probably got to interact with 10 influencers a day. Whatever it is, don't wait for the motivation. Just commit to doing it. And then like Nike says, right, just do it.
Love it. One of the things that I know you're really passionate about is setting up your environment for success. And if you guys are watching the video, you will see that Scott has a pull-up bar in the back of his office. How much does that play into the commitment? So I want to hear from you about like, okay, I want to make that commitment. That's something that's important to me. How do I set up my environment around me for success?
Got it. Great question. And I think Ben Hardy probably wrote the seminal work on this. His book, Willpower Doesn't Work, is really great. And in Willpower Work, he talks about the idea that like, hey, our physical environment defines the choices we're going to make. And where it hit home with me is he even used this example in the book, and it just like stung me like a knife, where he said something to the effect of, hey, if you want to eat healthy and be healthy, you cannot have Oreos in your house. Like, you just can't, period. End of story. Because Scott Groves, after a 16-hour workday and then rushing home to spend time with my family and then winding down and watching The Walking Dead, I am completely out of mental energy. I am completely out of willpower. If there's Oreos in the house, I'm grabbing a stack of Oreos and a large cup of milk, and I'm going to end my day with like some disgusting phosphate sugar, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not judging the people that do that, because I've gone through very long seasons of my life where I've been very unhealthy and I ate a lot of Oreos. But if you're the type of person that doesn't want to do that, or you say to yourself you don't want to do that, you have to change your physical environment and you have to set up what's around you for success. I cannot stay healthy and under 200 pounds if there's Oreos in the cupboard. I just can't. Like, I actually thought about moving the physical location of where our mortgage office is, because there's a King Taco downstairs. And for those of you that have ever been to Southern California, King Taco is amazing. It's so easy to go down there and get some carnitas and a large Dr. Pepper, and that doesn't really fit into my health goals. But you mentioned the pull-up bar, which is behind me. There's this big pull-up bar contraption ab machine. And that's because a bunch of people in our office said, hey, you know what? We've got this silly notion that like one of the ways we can get more fit in 2019 is to be able to hang from a bar for a minute or more, which, guys out there, if you're rolling your eyes, I challenge you to go try to hang from a bar right now in the pull-up position for a minute. It's damn near impossible. And we wanted to be able to do 10 pull-ups, because we heard that any guy that can do 10 pull-ups is basically in the top 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% of physical ability in America. True statement. Go try to do 10 pull-ups. So we said, you know what, we're never going to do it if we just say we're going to do it. We have to change our physical environment. So we bought this $200 pull-up bar that now sits in my office, and everybody comes in here a couple times a day and tries to hang from it. Another thing, like I already showed you, this weekly call tracker. Like, I know my income is directly correlated to how many maintenance calls, relationship calls, and cold calls I make every single day. I know this. I've been doing it for 19 years. I literally wrote the book on lead generation. And if this physical representation of the calls I have to make isn't on my desk, printed in color, with a pen and a highlighter right next to it, I will find an excuse not to make my 10 calls. Like, everybody procrastinates at the end of the day and never seems to get to the activities. Similarly, I use a digital calendar. I use a lot of digital tools. I have shiny object syndrome, just like every other salesperson, but I still keep a physical diary. What I'm holding up right now, for those of you that are listening on the podcast, is Panda Planner. I don't have an affiliate link with Panda Planner, so I don't get any money for saying this, but pandaplanner.com, I like having the physical representation of my schedule. I was running late after a 10 a.m. appointment and we were scheduled 11 a.m. If I didn't have my physical journal, I would have missed the pop-up reminder on my phone. I would have missed the notification. We would not be having this conversation because I would have I would have been embarrassed to miss a call with somebody I care deeply about. But that's just the reality of our busy life and our busy nature and the pop-ups and the tweets and the beeps and the everything else. So, physical nature. And then one step further, like, I have the 12 books that I'm going to read this year, or actually reread, because I've read them all once, but that's my mission for 2019, is to go back and relearn all the stuff I forgot. The 12 books I'm going to read this year are sitting on my desk. It's super obnoxious. And every time I have a meeting, I got to move the stack of books, but I'm already through 2 of them because they're there. They're staring me in the face. I can't escape them. So I think controlling your physical environment, and there's all kind of, Zen and the art of tidying up and stuff that says you shouldn't be cluttered, which I agree to an extent. But if you completely declutter your life and you don't have a physical environment where you're reminded of all the things that you need to be getting done, chances are you probably won't do them. So that's my thought on physical space.
So one of the things that you talk about in your book, and that I know you're passionate about too, is that self-discipline of turning the phone on airplane mode when you're lead generating. And now I know so many of us freak out, like, well, what if my best client calls and I can't take their call, or I don't want to be unavailable? So tell us a little bit about the mindset behind that. What's the balance? Who do we take calls from? Do we not take calls from anybody? Like, how do we get past the mental hurdle of thinking that we're missing out on our best prospects calling us? Because I think that's a scary thing for a lot of salespeople out there.
Yeah, so I want to kind of combine to answer that question. That's another great question. You're good at this podcast interview thing. I want to combine kind of 3 different thought processes. One of my own, one of Jeb Blunt, who's a great guy who wrote the book Fanatical Prospecting, and one from a mentor of ours, John Berghoff and Hal Elrod. I kind of consider them one person, who wrote The Miracle Morning. And yeah, they are. They're basically attached to the event. So, between those 3 people, I kind of came up with the following. One, you've got to schedule time with yourself to lead generate. So I schedule every day from 9:45. I actually started at 9:37 because I'm a freak and I need 8 minutes to go get an iced tea and use the restroom and clear my decks. 9:37. I start at 9:45 until I'm either done with 10 quality contacts or 11 o'clock, whichever comes first. That's my lead generation time. That's what Jeb Blunt would call the golden hour. Everybody, including my wife, knows that there is a 0% chance you are going to bug me between 9:45 and 11 o'clock unless somebody is bleeding. That's my wife's criteria. In the mortgage business, there is a loan that has to fund by noon so that somebody can get the keys to their house. And for some reason, that's not going to happen. That's the only thing that the mortgage team is able to interrupt me about. And then in my coaching business, if we're going to lose one of our branches that has 10 or more coaching members that are paying on a monthly basis, that's the only time the coaching business can interrupt me. So 3 really, really batshit crazy dramatic things would have to be going wrong for me to get thrown off that golden hour. And, just like we have to make an appointment for everything else, we have to make an appointment with our lead generation time. So first of all, I block off that window. Everybody knows it's a no-fly zone. Anybody that knows me just knows they're not going to get a call back by, until after 11 o'clock. That's one thing. Then the next concept, and this is kind of what came from John and Hal, is we have to get really good at interrupting interruptions. So if you go to your phone and you go through the settings, you probably have automatic notifications turned on over 100 apps. Chase Bank is pinging you to let you know a transaction went through, and you got retweeted, and that's pinging up, and you've got a Facebook message, and this is pinging up. Turn off all the notifications except for the two that are most important to you. For me, it's calendar and text message. I even have phone messages blocked because I get so many telemarketing calls. So you have to learn how to interrupt interruptions by turning off all the notifications. And I tend to leave my phone in the other room and just use a headset so I can't even see the texts that are coming in. But if you have to have your phone in front of you, there's a very easy hack where if you do get a call from your spouse or the best client or somebody who you really need to talk to, you just pick up the phone and you say, hey, this is Scott. The relationship with you, or the value that I put on a relationship is so high. I just interrupted a very important hour of focused activity I have going on. Is this something I can call you back on in an hour, or can we solve what you were calling for in 10 seconds? And you would be surprised how many people say, oh yeah, just quick one question. Can we do this? Yes or no? It's done in 10 seconds and it's done. Or they're like, I was just calling you to shoot the shit. I'll give you a call later this week. Or yeah, sure. Call me back in 60 minutes. It's a longer conversation. Either way you slice it, you've showed them value and honor by picking up the call. You've shown yourself that you can stick to your value of lead generating by telling them that you're in a very important 1 hour. Is this something we can, get out of the way in 10 seconds, or I'll call you in an hour. There's, the house is not burning down, right? None of us, and I don't think anybody listening to your podcast is an emergency room doctor or nurse. Other than that, the building is not burning down. The coaching client's not going anywhere. The real piece of real estate isn't on fire. The influencer isn't going to disappear off of Instagram tomorrow. Like, just let it go. Do your hour of lead generation. Keep your phone on airplane mode, on do not disturb. Turn off all the notifications. Do the lead generation hour, because then what you'll find is when you get all of that stuff out of the way early in the morning, then you've got 5 or 6 hours to go try all of your other ideas and play with your other widgets and troll around on Facebook and pretend like that's work in lead generation, which it's not. We'll get to that in a minute. But just do the hour of focused lead generation activity, relationship building activity, impactful activity, whatever your most important, impactful hour is. Do it early, do it undisturbed, get it out of the way, tell everybody that's what you're doing so they'll leave you alone. And then the rest of the day, you can kind of screw around.
It's so true. And that's one thing that has actually helped me from this book is it re-inspired me to be super consistent about my morning lead generation. And actually every day, except today, how ironic that it's the day I'm interviewing you, I've done it in the morning. So I'm going to do mine this afternoon. I had an appointment I had to be at this morning. I was actually hosting a networking event, which I know you say counts sometimes as lead
that counts,
right?
Belly to belly is lead generation.
But it's amazing how it almost feels like getting in your workout where like by the time you're done with it, you feel peaceful. You're like, whew, I've got all day now to do whatever else I want. And it sets up the rest of your day just to feel really good and at peace. And one of the things that I like doing is setting a timer on my computer. I just use eggtimer.com and I can watch the countdown going because I'll just do it for an hour. I like what you said about it's either 10 contacts or it's like an hour, 15 minutes. But that allows me to watch it and it's kind of like, okay, I can see the time. It goes by a lot faster than you expect and you just get it done and you move on with your day. So I'm a fan.
It's the best and you have to do it. And, one of the things that I always worry about is that in our Instagram world, in our Facebook world, a lot of people are being tricked into thinking that marketing is lead generation. And marketing is not lead generation. They're two very different things. Growing brand awareness is not lead generating. And I don't know if you want me to go into that, but it's really, really worrisome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's a big potential misconception. It's something a lot of people are probably listening to and going, well, I don't know if I agree with that. I think my Instagram posts are lead generating. I see people respond back. So explain the difference. Why are they not the same thing?
Yeah, so I think something that's really important, and I will use the mortgage example because that's what I'm most intimately familiar with. A friend of mine is a veteran. He does VA loans. VA loans are a little niche of the mortgage market where veterans can buy a house with zero money down. And he happened to jump on his phone, do a Facebook, live feed and said, hey, I'm about to walk into this real estate office. I'm just going to explain to them why doing a VA loan with zero money down is no more or less risky than doing a loan with 20% down. It's just a product that veterans can utilize And just because they're putting 0 down versus 20% down doesn't mean intrinsically that they're less qualified or that you should look at it as the stepchild of the mortgages industry. And I just want to explain that to realtors so that they're comfortable, because my goal is to get more veterans into homes. Great. That got picked up by a couple of veteran organizations, and within a day, he had, maybe 2 days, he had 40,000 views, all kinds of comments, all kinds of interactions with that post, which the mortgage industry is not sexy. I know for some people, if they're not getting millions of views, then that's a problem. In the mortgage industry, to get 40,000 views on a video talking about a financial product is insanely, that's like upper echelon marketing. The problem is, if he doesn't, which he didn't, if he doesn't go in and interact with every single person who interacted with that video. So somebody comments on it, he private messages and said, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm really inspired by doing VA loans. If you, a family member or a veteran ever wants to do a VA loan, please give me a call. I'd love to help them. And then a day later, back to that same private message with that same person. Hey, reached out yesterday about VA loans. Hey, also want to let you know that we do many other type of loans, jumbo loans, conventional loans. Can I get your email address so I can keep in touch? A day later, there was hundreds of comments and hundreds of people that liked the video. At that moment of impact, if he had done the lead generation, the private messaging, the friend request, add them to a Facebook group where he talks about mortgages, ask for their email address, ask for the business, that's lead generation. Putting up the video and having something go viral, that's cool, but that's just marketing. Not a single person who interacted with that video then called him for a VA loan. He had to do the lead generation to follow up. And so what I find a lot when I'm coaching realtors or mortgage professionals, or I have a lot of people in these business organizations that I belong to who are entrepreneurs running other businesses, they're a little frustrated with their social media strategy, because they're putting up the content, they're putting up the videos, and somebody has convinced them if you do that, then money in business will just rain from the skies. Well, no, the social media and the brand awareness, that's step number 3 in a very intricate, very long slog through lead generation. Lead generation, step 1 is getting famous with your wife or spouse or family. Lead generation part 2 is making the 10, 15, 20, 100 contacts a day, the phone calls, getting out that brand recognition through phone calls and influence and sphere and people in your professional organization. And then stage 3 is going to, Facebook and Instagram and putting videos out there. And in the coaching group that I run, where I now have critical mass and I have a couple hundred paying members, now I can go out there and be the influencer and put up the Facebook post and hope that that pulls other loan officers into the coaching program. But when we had 5 people in the coaching program and I was losing $4,700 a month just to have the technology up and running, I was cold calling every loan officer I came across to ask them if they wanted to be part of the coaching program for $89 a month. So there's a progression of get famous with your wife, make the cold calls, then worry about step 3, which is the social media platform and the influencing and the putting out organic content.
Yeah. So a couple things there, and I want to come back to being famous with your wife because I'm intrigued by that. But before we do that, one of the things you said that interests me is when you were losing that $4,700 a month, the thing you knew to do was pick up the phone and ask someone to buy from you, which I find it is typically the shortest path to cash, right? If you need money now, you just need to call someone and ask. Here's what I can imagine people thinking and being uncomfortable with is the idea of that loan officer you talked about doing the video and then going and direct messaging everybody who commented or who liked it. I can feel a lot of people thinking, ooh, well, that feels too salesy and he jumped 3 steps ahead and he should warm up the relationship first. What would you say to somebody who feels that's taking it too aggressively and maybe they needed to build more of a relationship first? Does that make sense?
I would say, yeah, it totally makes sense. I would feel anybody who's selling a product or service and backs themselves into a corner let me start over. Anybody who sells a product or service and then backs themselves into a corner where they feel too salesy, it's either because you don't believe in yourself or you don't believe in your product. I mean, coming from the mortgage industries, there was times in 2010 where as a loan officer, people looked at you like the bane of society who was, part of the machine that almost crashed the world economy. I mean, that's the reality. The financial industries were these evil giants. Within the financial industries, the lenders are the worst. within the lending industry, loan officers were the scumbags, and scumbag loan officers in Southern California, where I live, were the worst of the worst of the worst, because we were the most priced bubble economy in housing to ever see the face of the planet, other than maybe like Japan in 1989. But anyway, and so had I not been confident in myself of doing ethical business, had I not been confident in the fact that like home ownership made even more sense in 2010 when things were super cheap and you could get a house that's now 50 cents on the dollar back in 2010 versus 2019, if I didn't have faith in myself in that product, you're right, every cold call would have felt like me being sleazy or too salesy. So yes, relationships are important. Business relationships are important. My number one referral source is a realtor who I had to introduce myself to 16 times before she remembered my name. I mean, so I get the relationship building, but if you're the person out there projecting marketing and just vomiting information on people through social media, you might as well take the next step and lead generate to those people and try to get their email and try to get their business, because they're interacting with your content. They're kind of giving you social permission to go to that next salesy step because they integrated with your content.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was meeting this morning at the networking event that I was hosting, and there was a woman there who runs a day spa here in the Atlanta area. And it's a small spa, but she has like 3,500 followers on Instagram. And that's a decent amount for a small business. And she was talking about how she'd hired like all these different millennials to try to help her with her social media, which made me laugh, because I think is like, if you're a millennial, you're supposed to automatically know how to do social media. But she had hired this new woman to help her manage her Instagram. And she was like, it's just really frustrating me that I'm not getting sales off of it. I'm not getting business. And I just took a look through her feed, and even though there was good content about what she does, there was never once an ask. Never once did it say, hey, come in and visit us. Hey, here's a coupon that you can use. Like, hey, we'd love for you to come to this next event. And so that's a very mild version, I think, of what you're talking about. But even that, like, don't just throw out a lot of great content and expect that people will come to you. I think you have to give them the natural next steps and progression. So I feel like there's a balance there. One other thing I want to ask you about too, a distinction is, I feel like there's maybe two different approaches in the sales world. And one tends to be the more linear, like, hey, just pound out the calls, like 10 calls a day, 100 calls a day, whatever it is. It's a numbers game. Just if you do enough activity, the results will come. Then there's this other camp that is much more about, well, I want to build strong relationships with people, and I'm just going to go out and network and see what organically happens. And I want to hear from you. Where do you feel like the sweet spot is in between those two? How do they come together? Is there one that you think is more effective than another? Kind of explain what's the difference between like that hard driving cold calling versus relationship building.
Yeah, I think like everything else, you just have to be self-aware, right? I know a very, very intelligent mentor of mine. He said, look, there's two ways to skin this cat. You can spend a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time and maybe a lot of years, not achieving your financial goals and not even really achieving any level of financial success, so that you can end up selling one product one time for $1 million. Or you can grind every day to sell a $1 product 1,000,000 times. So there's really no right or wrong answer, right? Like, people have become very successful, very influential, millionaires, tens of millionaires, billionaires by selling, 89-cent products like plastic balls and chewing gum and stuff like that. There's also a lot of people that focus on the long game of like, hey, I've got to build networks and relationships and something that maybe even loses me money or costs me time for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then I'm going to sell it for $1 million or $10 million or whatnot. And maybe that's not everybody's goal. Maybe not everybody listening to your podcast wants to be a millionaire or sell a product or isn't even in sales. But I think the key to what you're asking is to be self-aware, right? In Los Angeles County, you can go from condo to castle in 5 blocks. I remember a time when Brad Pitt was getting divorced from somebody, I don't know who it was, and there was like this 3-house compound in Los Feliz Village that was up on a hill, and it was listed for, I don't know, pick a number, $20 million, $23 million. And literally less than a mile away, 8 blocks south, you cross over Sunset, there was a duplex for sale for $340,000, which is dirt cheap in Los Angeles. And it's like, the person that goes after the realtor relationship and the loan on that $340,000 house is totally different than the loan officer who goes after the realtor relationship and the loan for that $20 million house. They have to dress differently. They have to work at different financial institutions. They have to approach the relationship differently. It's squirrel hunting versus elephant hunting. And I'm not here to judge somebody going one way or the other. I mean, I have opinions in my own business, but the guy that's going to do the $340,000 loan has to be self-aware enough to say, like, cool, I got to knock out my 10 calls a day. I've got to create a conveyor belt of deals. That's what I've got to do. And I'm going to get paid more per deal, I'm going to get paid a higher commission on that deal, but I got to do so many more deals. Versus the guy that wants to be the lender to the stars, he needs to work at a very particular bank. He needs to dress a very particular way. He probably has to belong to a very specific country club here in Southern California to get that business. And there's no right or wrong answer to your question or to my analogy. It's just you have to be self-aware enough to do it. I think one of the dangers of social media and one of the dangers of the internet is it has given us this illusion that we can be all things to all people. And like, well, I have the technology to be able to do both, so I'll go get the $340,000 loan and the $20 million loan. No, you won't. You just won't. I mean, the same realtor will not get both listings. The same insurance agent will not insure both houses. Like, you just have to be self-aware of what your model is. And I have found for myself, who I'm not great at those deep-seated long-term relationships. I'm just better to be on the conveyor belt, to be on the hamster wheel, to keep making the calls every day. And frankly, we have a lot of turnover in our office of loan officers that just can't keep up. And that's a blessing and a curse. So I think to answer your question, I know how I run my life. I know how I run my business. I don't begrudge anybody that does the exact opposite. They just have to be self-aware enough to know that that's the game they're playing.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting answer. I think that makes a lot of sense. So the final, second to last question, this is the one I think a lot of people are wondering about right now. Tell us about being famous with your wife. And if we don't have a wife, what should we do?
Being famous with your wife or your spouse. I do a lot of live event facilitation. That's one of the ways that you and I met. I'll do live event facilitation, and I'll have all the salespeople in the room. I'll be like, okay, everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. And I'll preface it with, if you have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a wife or a husband, a spouse, a significant other, or if you've ever had one of those people while you've been a salesperson, stand up. Of course, everybody stands up because everybody's been in some type of relationship since they've been in sales. And then I say, if this has ever happened to you, and I'll use the example, I just did a big event in Philadelphia for a couple hundred realtors. I said, Mr. and Mrs. Realtors, if this has ever happened to you, sit down. You're at home, your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend comes home and says, hey, Billy at work, or Jane, who I was in a sorority with, or Betsy, my cousin, they just bought a new house and it's got this great pool. We're going to have to go over there next month to check out the pool, or their housewarming. And you as the realtor, you're sitting there and you're like, honey, why didn't I get an at-bat to help with that transaction or help with that sale? Everybody in the room sits down, because this has happened. I don't care if you sell widgets or books or houses or financial services. Your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend has come home and said, hey, somebody I'm really, really close with just bought the product that you sell, and they didn't use you. And so what I tell to realtors is I say, look, if you're not even famous enough with your wife for her to be referring you business, why do you think you can go on Facebook and make money rain from the skies from putting out a few videos? Like, literally the person you sleep with does not have you top of mind enough to refer you into those business situations. What the hell are you doing on Facebook trying to build relationships with strangers? And so we have this exercise that we do for all new loan officers here before I will hire them is, hey, who are your 50 people you want to be famous with? You know, your spouse, your parents, your CPA, your insurance professional, the person who did your life insurance, the person that does your investments. If you're not keeping those relationships top of mind, and if you're not going through our 12-step follow-up program with each of those 50 people in the first month or two that you're with us, you're not going to be a successful loan officer. Because before you start playing on Facebook and you want to go stand up at the board of realtors and try to tell all these people that they should give you loans because you brought them donuts, you are crazy if you are not famous with your core 50 people. And my wife knows this. Like, if her cousin or somebody buys a house and they didn't use me for the mortgage, she doesn't bring it up. Like, I got to find out on Facebook or something that they bought a house. Because she's like, I don't know, man. Luis, I told him to give you a call for the mortgage, and he went with his cousin's friend's brother. I'm really sorry, honey. I'm like, okay, well, at least you're trying. So, whatever business you do, if you're not famous enough with your wife or your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your husband to be referring what you do, then you are missing the mark. You need to stay off of Facebook. You need to have some coffee appointments with those people. You need to re-engage them. You need to cold call your warm relationships and remind them what you do for a living. And then you can move on to sphere of influence, trade organizations, playing on Facebook, which I love playing on Facebook. I'm not anti-Facebook. I'm a Facebook junkie. But you got to be famous with your wife first.
That's so good. Low hanging fruit, literally at home. Who knew? That's awesome. This is so informative to me. And so if somebody's listening and they want to learn more about you, they want to read your book, they want to find out about Consolidated Coaching, how can people connect with you further from here?
So the easiest thing to do, I'm not a big marketer. I don't have a funnel or anybody to text me or anything like that. I would be forever gracious if somebody was to go buy the $16, $17 book. And more important than buying the book, I think I make $4 from Amazon for selling the book. I love when people buy the book, read the chapters one day at a time, implement that, and then just send me an email, letting me know how it's changing their life or they're doing more business. So if you just want to email me, my personal email, I get every single one of these is Scott at Consolidated Coaching. So my personal email is Scott at Consolidated Coaching. No fancy spelling. It's spelled just like Consolidated and just like coaching. And then if you want to buy the book, Lead Generate 61 Days to Double Your Pay by Scott Groves. It's on Amazon. I would just love for anybody listening to this to keep in touch. And maybe one day I'll be a really big deal like some of our friends. I'll have to hire a virtual assistant to answer my emails. But until then, I like keeping in touch with people. And then, if there's some live event coming up or, I don't spam people, but if there's some live event coming up or some coaching facilitation that I'm doing, I'll send it out to my database and just let them know what I'm up to. So yeah, keep in touch by email. Find me on Facebook, Scott Groves. I think I'm one of two there. You'll figure it out pretty fast. Or buy the book, Lead Generate. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Hey, Scott, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. This was super enlightening to me. I know it was to everybody listening. So appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks so much for spending some time with me and Scott today. Until next time, remember to go out there and make an impact every single day in your life. I cannot wait to see you next time on the Instant Impact Podcast. Bye, guys.